So we're talking now with people from Narcolepsy Ireland. We're talking about with Rachel McComiskey, who is a secretary and trustee, and also with Orla Nolan, who suffers with narcolepsy. So you're both very welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Great to be here.
Thanks for having us on.
It's great to talk to you. So, Rachel, might start with you, if you don't mind. You might tell us what narcolepsy is and what are the symptoms.
Yeah, sure thing. So narcolepsy, it's a chronic neurological disorder, which is caused by the brain's inability to regulate the sleep-wake cycle. So that might mean as much to you as it did to me when I first heard about it. If you asked me that question back in 2016, I wouldn't have been able to tell you. I knew very little about narcolepsy. The little I did know, I got from movies, the media, and it was all wrong. So the little I knew was wrong, and I went on quite a big learning journey back in 2016. The main symptoms, for me, the biggest surprise, when I hear the word sleep, I think rest. I think that people who are getting additional sleep are getting additional rest. And what I discovered very quickly was that people with narcolepsy, who suffer with narcolepsy, don't sleep in the same way that people without narcolepsy do. So they don't cycle into the restful part of sleep in the same way that you and I would. So one of the main symptoms of narcolepsy, and you might be surprised to hear this, is interrupted nighttime sleep. Okay. So people with narcolepsy don't enjoy a high quality of restful, restorative sleep, and often their nighttime sleep is really interrupted. Which means that they're going through sleep-wake cycles, constantly throughout the night. And come morning time, they've had a terrible night's sleep and they haven't rested at all and are completely and utterly exhausted. And I don't think that when we say the word exhausted, that I can truly understand what that means to somebody with narcolepsy. Somebody once told me, somebody who had narcolepsy advised me that if I wanted to understand what it was like to spend a day in their shoes, that I should go without sleep for 72 hours. Okay. And then I would understand what it is to exist and to live with narcolepsy. So that's one of the symptoms, is the interrupted nighttime sleep. At nighttime as well, they can also be hallucinations. So, and these are realistic, sometimes terrifying, very difficult to distinguish from reality hallucinations that occur as somebody with narcolepsy typically drifts in or out of sleep, just on that border between sleeping and waking. If you imagine for a child, never mind an adult, that can be terrifying. They can be hyper realistic and very different to distinguish. On top of that, there's sleep paralysis, which means while you're experiencing these hallucinations, you can also suffer from sleep paralysis. So I think, maybe some of the listeners will understand and relate to, I think people without narcolepsy sometimes suffer from sleep paralysis, but not at the same scale, not on the same level. So it's a very uncomfortable nighttime, I suppose, of sleep for people. Then we have the daytime symptoms. You have the excessive daytime sleepiness. So again, this is not just, for somebody without narcolepsy might say, well, I'm exhausted today. I could do with a nap. This is an irresistible need to sleep. And partly because it's difficult to regulate that sleep-wake boundary, but secondly, because it's just absolutely exhausted. The other one then is automatic behavior. So this was, again, a new one to me. So you could be talking to somebody with narcolepsy, and I think that a good example, and maybe Orla might have more of this, is in a classroom setting. If you're taking notes, you might continue to sit there and take notes and your hand is moving, but you've stopped writing and you're just, you don't realize what you're doing. You look like you're doing it, but you're not actually doing it. And then the final symptom, that's not necessarily, there's different types of narcolepsy. So this symptom isn't present for everybody who has narcolepsy, but it's a symptom called cataplexy. So I don't think people have heard of it, but it's quite extreme. And so people who suffer with cataplexy tend to be diagnosed slightly earlier than people who don't. Okay. But cataplexy it's a physical response to an emotion or a strong reaction. So if somebody with narcolepsy who suffers from cataplexy, for example, would find something funny, would laugh at a joke, or become startled, they actually lose, or they can lose, muscle strength. So it's called muscle tone, but it's actually weakness in the muscle, and that can be anything from maybe your jaw dropping open, or maybe your head lolling around, to a complete collapse. So just completely aware, fully conscious, collapsing to the ground and not being able to regain the strength in their muscles temporarily. Now it will pass, and they'll be able to get up and go on again. So within a matter of seconds or minutes. So it's a temporary, but it's in response to a stimulus such as I said, maybe a startle, if somebody gave you a fright, maybe very upset, about something. Maybe somebody's telling you a joke and you're finding it funny. And we've had, stories about people maybe being in a social situation and, as being told that they're drunk when they haven't had any drink, but their response to being in a social group and laughing at jokes, can be physical. So it's not present for everybody who has narcolepsy, but it certainly is one of the symptoms that we would look out for. And it's, as I said, for some people, the most obvious symptom. So that's I think a summary of narcolepsy. And as I said, there are different types of narcolepsy, and there's other sleep disorders which are closely related. We're only starting really to learn about where narcolepsy stops and where other disorders like idiopathic hypersomnia start. So all of that, there's a lot of research going into that at the moment, and we're learning where the boundaries exist between those.
And do you have figures for the amount of people that suffer with narcolepsy?
We do, yeah. So it's classified as a rare disease. So it is estimated that worldwide, 1 in 2,000 people are diagnosed with narcolepsy. So that would mean in Ireland alone, there'd be over 2,500 people with narcolepsy. Now, it is assumed that these figures assume that these are assumed on worldwide figures, but we estimate that up to just over 80% of the people who suffer with narcolepsy in Ireland are undiagnosed.
Wow.
So people who suffer with narcolepsy, it tends to emerge in early adolescence, but not always. It can happen at any stage of life, but I think it's most prominent at early adolescence. And it can be diagnosed maybe as depression, or I think ME is one of the ones, so it's often misdiagnosed if it's diagnosed at all. So it's not widely understood, I suppose, in the GP practice. So you need to be referred to a sleep specialist to get the diagnosis, and if that doesn't happen, unfortunately you live completely undiagnosed. So one of the aims of Narcolepsy Ireland is to try and raise awareness about the condition and to reach those people who are undiagnosed, so that they can realize, maybe this is, I've been lonely living with these symptoms all my life and trying to manage them and thinking maybe I was crazy, maybe, there was nothing wrong with me, but that, and often that's the case. We get these emails in every so often to say, I thought it was just me. I've been trying to manage this I can't believe that other people feel like this. So for us, we want to try and reach those undiagnosed in Ireland, to point them towards the helps and supports that are available, because there are, medications, there's supports, there's things that can be done to manage the symptoms of narcolepsy, to lead to a better quality of life overall, but also to provide a sense of community. So there's others in Ireland who know exactly how you feel. You don't need to feel so lonely in your condition. We've put parents of children who are diagnosed as young as 5 years old, who are diagnosed with narcolepsy, in touch with other parents who can say, look, we've been where you are. These are the supports that are available to you. Yeah. This is the progress we've seen. We know what you're going through. Nobody else does, but we know what you're going through. So all of that is really important. And there's some of the aims that we have. So
I assume employers would be reluctant, would they, to employ somebody if they hear that they have narcolepsy, and they probably have all kinds of ideas about it, have they?
Yeah. One of the big things, I'll just interrupt here, because I actually work in a HR department.
Okay.
Yes.
So one of the biggest things is about disclosure. So if somebody comes to a company and they explain, and it again depends on the severity of some of their symptoms. So there's something called reasonable accommodation that most employers will kind of sit down and discuss with somebody. So for my situation, I'm able to work from home. So it means I'm able to do same as everybody else, do my job, same as everyone else. But because I work from home, I can have a nap when I need to, and I can kind of work around the symptoms for me. But there are a lot of experiences as well, aren't there, Rachel, where you would hear from people that did have trouble with work. But one of the things that I hope to bring to Narcolepsy Ireland as well is just try and do support with people to maybe be able to give some of that advice on how they can talk to an employer, which I think is extremely useful, because it can be very embarrassing. Like, it can be embarrassing to say to someone, you know, a lot of people will try and hide the symptoms rather than, you know.
Which is the wrong way completely.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Orla, I might stop with you now for a couple of minutes and just ask you about your diagnosis. When was it, and how long beforehand had you suffered from narcolepsy?
Well, to the exact point, I was a late diagnosis. So the symptoms would have started in late teens. And at that stage, you just put everything down to teenage years, first, whatever it was. Or so I would have had little kind of fainting fits when I was out with my friends, and they all thought it was very funny. Or I was out dancing, the next thing I was laughing, next thing I was on the ground, all the kind of typical things. Even though I haven't been formally diagnosed with cataplexy, I definitely do have that muscle weakness. But then when my kids came along in my late 20s, my husband especially, and people that I worked with, said, look, your tiredness seems to be way more than even just a new mother, because I'd be folding up clothes and I'd fall asleep on the pile of clothes. Or when I put my small kids to bed, they'd, you know, I'd be fast asleep and they'd crawl over me and go back downstairs to my husband. And there was all kinds of different things. Out in the car, if we went on a family drive, I'd nearly be asleep by the end of the driveway. So it was just started to become more and more pronounced. And I'd gone to doctors for everything. So a bit like that kind of misdiagnosis. I was diagnosed with asthma. They thought it was something to do with, I'm also have a hypertone, you know, I'm hypermobile, so really flexible. And they said some of the tiredness may come from that. So I was sent to, eventually there was a new doctor came into the clinic and she was fabulous. She said to me, I'm not convinced that that's everything. So she sent me to a chest specialist to have a look at my asthma and stuff and see what was going on. And he thought it was something quite bizarre, maybe even something quite ominous, and then did all the tests and said, no, it's nothing to do with that. You definitely have chronic sinus catarrh, bronchitis, bronchial asthma, but that's mild. So he sent me to a sleep doctor. So at this stage now I was 36. So that was spending all those years not knowing what was going on, feeling like a complete, you know.
And how long beforehand did you spend with narcolepsy that you didn't know about?
Nearly 20 years.
Wow.
I would say nearly 20 years. So it was just a constant struggle. Lost lots of friends along the way because I started to not go out, started to not do things. So, you know, even to go to a family occasion, you'd nearly have your nails in your palms trying to keep yourself going during things. So I do all kinds of things to try and, you know, create stress almost to make myself feel awake. So once I got the diagnosis, I got the first kind of tablets that I went on, which are kind of a focus on alertness. It was like I went from having a candlelight and suddenly taking these tablets, I was up to 150 watt bulb. Wow. It was unbelievable. And I went around everyone saying, oh, so this is what it's like when you're supposed to be awake. And I was wired, absolutely wired, delighted with myself. You know, so it made a massive difference. So for me, exactly to Rachel's point, getting diagnosis is absolutely paramount. And over the years, because I'm now 58, so there's been different kind of advancements in the medicines and stuff. So I take an antidepressant, which helps with some of those horrible kind of hallucinations and the kind of muscle weakness. And then I'm also on a new medication, which is like a histamine to the brain type of thing. It's a new form of medication, and it's that's been a game changer as well. So that is they call it a histamine directed medication. And what I've noticed is my driving has drastically improved So I
Right.
started taking that. So as I say, as the new medicines come out or new treatment comes out, they're starting to be able to pinpoint and you know, the medicines are, so it's not a case of kind of throwing your hat in and say, no, it'll never change. It's a chronic disease, I'll always have it. But kind of being involved in Narcolepsy Ireland and James's Hospital as well, I'm a patient there.
Right.
It's to keep up to date with things is really, really important. I actually use a lot of techniques that you would use for ADHD. And if you take ADHD, which I was diagnosed with when I was younger, and my 2 kids have it as well, a lot of the techniques there are about staying alert.
Right.
So they're about keeping your attention. So for me, it's trying to keep awake. And so things like, I always have things to fiddle with. If I'm at meetings, I doodle and I write so many notes, which has actually been a huge benefit to me because everyone knows if they want to know what's going on, ask me, because I'm the one who's taking the notes, proper notes for all the meetings and things. And then I knit and crochet. So a massive change, and my husband thinks this is hilarious as well, where I used to be able to drag myself through work, get through work, but then end up on the couch and I'd be unconscious. Yeah. So I was no company to anybody. You know, I would find it really hard to stay awake until I then would go to bed and then have all this horrible interrupted night's sleep as well. So I picked up crocheting and knitting. And as my husband said, it was really funny. The first night I did it, where I'd normally be asleep by about 7:45 on the couch, I was awake till 11:30. And then the next night I was doing it, I was awake till 12:30. And then he was going, oh my God, this is unbelievable. So that's what I do every night now, I either knit or crochet or embroider. And the physical thing, and it was something that I'd come across with things like ADHD, using your hands is sending different messages to your brain as well. Yeah. And if our brains just don't get the right messages to say, Taya Culla, go to sleep or stay awake, then doing something with your hands is a way of kind of triggering the alertness almost. So
it focuses the mind.
Yeah. So I've ended up now, I've knit, I'm heading towards the thousands now of hats and blankets for charity. And then everybody gets a present. If they're getting a present now, they're getting a handmade present. Well.
And tell me about this. Are there things that you can't do? You said you drive.
I drive, but I'll only do very short distances. So I'll take my medication beforehand. So no more than about a 20-40 minute distance. Then I'm going out at night time. So for me, going out for meals and things, I like doing brunch because I'm probably more alert at that time than I would be later on in the evening. But I dread being invited to social events because I don't know what I'm going to be like on the day. So even for my daughter's wedding, I was absolutely dreading it because I thought, how am I going to stay alert all day? And I would call them, I have earth angels, my kids, I'd call them my earth angels, my husband, unbelievable, at just spotting it. And people I've worked with as well, because I've always been so au fait about talking about it in work, that people would actually say, oh, we can see it in your face. Your face starts to kind of drain. Okay. And it's like that kind of just blank face. And they'll go and get me a cup of coffee, or they'll bring me into the room where I can lie down or something like that. But on the day of my daughter's wedding, all the makeup was happening and everything. And just the stress of that, talking about one of the triggers, I could feel myself just dying to go to sleep. So my sister-in-law, another one of my earth angels, kind of tipped me on the shoulder and she said, okay, you bed. So I went up and I had a nap, and it was amazing the difference it made. So like something simple as well, having that short nap when you just hit that wall of just that, you know, you just really can't stay awake, having a nap, having a rest, and then you can kind of come back again. So it's so important to kind of figure out your physical way of dealing with it, and then finding things like something simple like a freezing cold can of Coke. So I used to always have something cold on my desk and work when I was in the office, and I put it at the back of my neck, and that would be like a jolt, and that would kind of make you feel a little bit more alert as well.
I get you. Now, Rachel, I want to come back to you and ask you about Narcolepsy Ireland. When was that founded, and what was the intention?
Sure. So my own involvement, I suppose, in 2018, my niece developed narcolepsy, and that's how I became involved. So she was 5 years old, and she developed narcolepsy, and we were really lucky that we were put in touch really quickly with this support group that had formed, which was the the early days of Narcolepsy Ireland. I think it was Narcolepsy in Ireland at that stage. And this was a group of volunteers who had suffered with narcolepsy that organized themselves to provide support and insights and put people in touch with each other who had narcolepsy. They had an online presence with a Facebook page. They had meetups and events. They were doing an awful lot of good things when I got in touch with them in 2018. But at that point, what they wanted to do was formalize themselves. They wanted to try and broaden their reach, to try and reach more people, particularly the undiagnosed. So they want to formalize themselves and actually get official charity status. So I came on board at that stage, and we became formally recognized as a charity in 2019. And our main goals is that community. So it is putting people with narcolepsy in touch with other people who have narcolepsy. So the only people who are ever going to understand what somebody with narcolepsy is experiencing on a day-to-day basis is somebody else with narcolepsy. As much as we would try from the outside, we don't know. We'll never know. Within that community, it's interesting. We do it through, physical meetups. We do it through virtual calls, and the conversation and the tips and the advice and I know that person or I went there. That kind of knowledge sharing is huge. And again, it's breaking down those barriers and making people feel less alone. We also want a second objective is around education. So we want to find as much information as we can that we can share with people who have narcolepsy. So, for example, if you have a child going to school, what are the supports that child can have? What sort of supports are available to them? Education, what sort of outside supports are available to them? So we try and gather as much of that information as possible through people in the community, and then share it back out with others. But we also want to educate the medical community. So GPs. Anytime I go in for any sort of a checkup, I mean, if you heard of narcolepsy, and without fail, it's a little bit don't know much about it, because it doesn't have, unfortunately, much of a spotlight on it in the general medical practitioner. So what we want to do is try and bring that more to the GPs, to the employers, to the educators, so they understand narcolepsy and what it actually means. What we found is that people with narcolepsy who have the supports in place, they thrive. They are highly successful people. They are doctors, they're solicitors, they can do anything they want. So it's just about making sure that the people that they meet along the way understand what narcolepsy is and what it isn't. I suppose that goes hand in hand with the awareness raising. So for somebody who's navigating their day with narcolepsy, we want them to meet people who are not as ignorant as I was back when I first came across narcolepsy. I was taking all my cues from TV, but to actually understand what that means, and how it's not limiting, and it's not humorous. It's a really difficult condition to live with, but with the right supports and the right understanding in place, that there's absolutely no reason why the world isn't their oyster. And then the last bit is just support. We have people that reach out to us saying, I think I might have narcolepsy. How on earth how do I find out? Or maybe there's somebody I'm living with that maybe they have narcolepsy, or what do I do? Or my child's about to sit the Leaving Cert. How can we support them? What's in place for them? Or, I'm about to do an interview. Do I disclose this? So all that kind of support that we can give. We also work closely with international groups. So we represent Ireland at European Narcolepsy Forum. And then we are also working with American groups. And that helps us to get an inside view of the research and the medications that are becoming available. And there is amazing research, great clinical trials going on at the moment. So, the very, very positive outlook for people who suffer with narcolepsy in terms of the supports and the medications are going to be available. So we just want to be able to be front and center at that, and make sure we can get whatever's available into Ireland as early as possible.
What advice would you give a newly diagnosed person?
Community. I would say there's great community 100%. Amongst those who have narcolepsy. So if you have been diagnosed, you have seen the sleep specialist, and you have your medication path set, I would say reach out to the community. We have quarterly virtual meetups, as we call them. So you don't even need to leave your home. A Zoom call, you get to meet other people. We have regional meetups, and every second year we aim to do big conferences, which is like a big event in Dublin, might be a full day event in Dublin. So you will get no advice like it anywhere in the world. You're not going to get it from your medical practitioners. Even they would advise community. reach out to the support
Yeah.
group. We'll put you in touch with somebody maybe in your area, maybe somebody maybe in the same area, same stage in life, you know, as you, and you can start learning more than you would through any other means, I would say.
We're right at the end of our time. So is there anything else you'd like to say?
Just two things, if you don't mind. Just that
Go ahead.
this Sunday on September 22nd is the 4th International World Narcolepsy Day. So there is some information on that on our website, which is www.narcolepsyireland.org. There's also information on the symptoms, how to reach out and get that support from us, some events that we have on, upcoming, and different activities, I suppose, that you've seen us do in the past. So I'd say have a look at that website. And there's also more information on World Narcolepsy Day on Project Sleep. So I'd have a look at that website too.
I can vouch for the website. I read every piece of information on it. It's extremely informative and very comprehensive.
Thanks very much.
It's
Yeah,
been
thank
great
you.
to talk to you both. Orla, Rachel, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very
Appreciate
much.
it.
You're very welcome.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.